Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on, well, we're going to check in on both of them, but we made a little agreement with ourselves that in bucket number 2 over here, we were going to leave this system untouched, basically, because 12 days ago we started down a quote-unquote set it and forget it path with this bucket right here. The game plan was to just continue feeding bucket number 1 as usual, and after 12 days I'm assuming they're ready for a little bit more food since the last check-in. But over here in bucket number 2, we also fed, down here somewhere is the level of bucket number 1, that they were the same then, but after feeding we piled in a whole bunch of leaves, and the whole idea was to fill this thing up to the very rim. And between each handful of leaves I sprinkled a little bit of worm chow in there too, just to have a little bit of food in there amongst the bunch of bedding that was being piled in. And I really want to keep to the whole concept of forgetting it for the most part, which means just not interfering with it. But I just wanted to demonstrate now that after 12 days, I believe that the plastic bubble wrap was kind of somewhere between this little end of this crosshatch pattern and the rim of the container. So it does appear to me like, I don't know, maybe the level of the system has dropped about that much, and that could simply be settling, but it's probably also a combination of not only the settling but the worms working down the stuff that's in the system. So we're really here just to feed bucket number 1. So I got some stuff to give them. Let's get a glove on and get to feeding these little guys. Oops, sorry. I've got my box of leaves so we could supplement the bedding similar to what's in bucket number 2, which is just a whole bunch of leaves that they got. There's carrot here and banana. And in addition to that, I've also got my shredded corn collection here, which I'm gradually working down. So I've got a whole bunch of additional corn cobs that I want to grind down in a similar fashion. This is my worm chow, so I thought we'd sprinkle a little bit of that in there too. So let's get to feeding these little guys. The other thing they got last time was some coffee. And a lot of times when we feed coffee to our worm bins, we include the coffee filter to serve as a feeding zone indicator to show ourselves where we last fed. Not that it would be so hard to track down where the last feeding in a system like this was. So we'll put that stuff right back the way we found it. This also appears to me like we might have laid a piece of newspaper across the top. I really don't remember. I mean, we saw that piece of newspaper draped across the top in bucket 2. So it is quite likely that bucket number 1 over here also received a top covering of newspaper, but it seems like the worms have more or less done away with it. It does seem like they're really doing a number on their bedding. The bedding's working down nicely. Lots of castings piling up. So these systems are now 63 days of age, just a week away from hitting 10 weeks of age. And I believe that this is feeding number 7 they're getting now. And the whole idea behind the set it and forget it was to not forget it forever. The whole idea was to run these systems up to 100 days of age. So the systems were 51 days old when we started this, and with the target being 100 days of age, at which point the set it and forget it test would come to an end. That gave us 7 weeks of set it and forget it. 7 times 7, 49. 49 days was the number of days we were going to run that little test for. So it's not a terribly long test, you know. I mean, not even 2 months. So we'll see how they do in there. Hopefully they'll be okay without us popping in on them all the time and checking in. I guess all I'm really doing is sort of tilling up the lower extents of the system just to see how things look down low. And I did bump into sort of a novelty item here, which is a pumpkin stem. Oh, well, you know, so far until now I've been pretty careful not to mess with the pumpkin stems in my systems, to just let them break down on their own. But I've been so curious just to see how one of those would react if I were to try to snap it, and it snapped pretty easily. in a lot of cases, whether it's pumpkin stems or corn cobs, whatever, in the past I'd always been very curious to see how long things take to break down on their own. But like I've been doing lately with corn cobs, my new thing has been just to start breaking them up and helping them with the breakdown process rather than just leaving them. And with pumpkin stems, I've got my Vermibag Mini, which is loaded with pumpkin stems. I got tons of pumpkin stems in there, so perhaps in other locations where we got pumpkin stem, we can not worry so much about allowing nature to take its course, and perhaps here and there we can start snapping those things and helping them break down too. So we just kind of aerated things and explored how the material down low looks, and as a result we've fluffed things up quite nicely. We've brought the whole level of this entire system up a little bit, and it'll just settle back down as the worms work their way through and they jostle things around, and obviously as they consume stuff too, the level of this thing will collapse and settle as all the little air pockets vanish. So it's kind of a back and forth of aerating and fluffing, and then over time the system just settling due to all the worm action. So I think when we finally get around to comparing how things are at the end of 100 days, it might be a good idea to leave at least maybe a week or 10 days up until that point, just to allow for natural settling to occur, so we can actually do a fair side-by-side comparison of the two systems. So now my box of leaves over here is not leaves that are damp like what we put into bucket number 2. Bucket number 2, you know, we didn't want to load it up with a whole bunch of dry leaves. We wanted to put in stuff that was going to be okay for the worms to just crawl through and hang out in. So we dampened pretty thoroughly, all the leaves that went in when we established the set it and forget it test. But I think here we're okay, you know, I mean, there's a good amount of moisture in the material around here, and all this frozen food, you can even see some of the frost is starting to establish itself on this food. So I mean, yeah, I mean, you know, carrot, banana peel, none of this really brings with it a great deal of moisture, but I just figured I think we're okay from a moisture perspective. So I'm sprinkling in a little bit of my worm chow. I thought that would be kind of cool to allow that stuff to sort of fall down through this layer of bedding. So it's not just bedding, but it's bedding mixed with food as well. And then in can come all these delicious shredded carrot peels and the banana peel. It's starting to thaw and dampen, so it's sticking to the container a bit, but I believe we've got almost all of it now. So you can see the couple pieces of carrot didn't really make it into the final dish. This would be like the stem end over here. You can see where the leaves actually were. This would be another stem end, so those two stem ends sort of got attached to each other for whatever reason. I guess this piece just didn't live up to expectations and ended up as worm food too. And a little banana peel. Yum yum. So, you know, I do feel like we did add quite a bit of bedding material, and over the next few weeks, as we gradually approach 100 days of age, it does feel to me like the ideal way to conduct this test would be to try to, over that time, apply just as much bedding as what went in to bucket number 2 in one lump sum. I mean, I don't really have a good way to gauge how much I had placed in there and how to keep up with that in order to, over time, match the same amount. So we'll just kind of wing it when it comes to that. It's probably the best we can do. I suppose I could have just taken 2 equal amounts one that would have gone directly into bucket number 2 at that time, and then hang on to that material to be gradually divvied out here into bucket number 1 over time. But I really didn't feel like going through all that extra trouble and hassle. Didn't seem like it was all that important to be so accurate. And then here, this stuff I'm sprinkling in now is the corn. It always seems like if I sprinkle in this corn onto some of this top layer of leaves, I've been doing this in a couple of my systems now, it seems like it's going to just help to increase the appeal of the leaves and hopefully drive worm traffic up into here. So I think that's more or less what we're after here today. We'll come back in with the feeding zone indicator and keep using it as long as it lasts. As far as the top covering paper that was in here, that got nibbled away, well, that's history. And I don't really have one to replace it with, so we're not going to worry about it. We'll just come back in with the bubble wrap cover, and we're finished. So that's it for our check-in with the now 63-day-old African Nightcrawler buckets, seeming to do quite nicely. A lot of castings piling up. And between now and day 100, we'll probably be back in here a couple more times to check in and to try to keep building up the material in here to be equivalent to what we had piled into bucket number 2 12 days ago. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.